Well, folks, this week has just definitely been one of those weeks. You know, lost quite a bit of good celebrities out there. These three being a few of them, and there's obviously also a lot of other celebrities that have unfortunately lost their life too. And to every celebrity that has lost their life, this past week, may they all rest in peace. May God be with all those who are dealing with losing loved ones. It is pretty sad. My main focus is going to be on these three. Well, mostly the two of the three, but I'll explain all three of them a little bit. I think I'll go more with talking about Ozzy Osbourne and Hulk Hogan, because I know them quite a bit. I've been fans of them for quite some time. I'm not saying that I know them like, I'm friends with them or I've talked to them before. No. I've known them for what they do. Malcome-Jamal Warner, other than a few movies that he's been in, like Tuskegee Airmen and a few other movies, and TV shows as well. I'm not too familiar with the dude, but from what I understand, he passed away on July 20th, which is my birthday, by the way. I turned 27 recently. And that's crazy, too, because, to think 8 years ago, frickin' Chester Bennington died on the same exact day. Except he died in 2017, and, Malcolm died on, recently in 2025. So, it's sad to think about. Apparently Malcolm died from drowning. From what I understand, he was at a beach and he was out having fun, and unfortunately ended up underwater, and he unfortunately drowned, and they confirmed that he was dead, and which is pretty sad to think about. Drowning is no laughing matter. It happens to a lot of people out there, unfortunately. I do know a few people that have drowned before. It's pretty messed up. It's not something I would ever wish to happen to anybody, and it's a pretty sad thing to happen. It's for that. My condolences to his family, all his close friends, and all of them. May God rest his soul. And my heart goes out to everybody affected by his passing. That's for sure. With Ozzy Osbourne, I've been hearing a lot of things about how he passed. From what I understand, he had Parkinson's disease. He was apparently diagnosed with it when he was 70 years old, and then by 2025 he lost his ability to walk because of it, and there was a few other things that was affecting him because of it. But I have looked into what exactly happened, and like I said, there's all sorts of things that have been coming up with Ozzy Osbourne, but all I will say is, what I do know is he was surrounded by his family, which I do feel bad for his family, by the way. It is pretty sad that he is no longer with his family anymore, but I do believe he's in a better place. You know, people sit there and say, you know, after we die, you know, either we end up in heaven or we end up in hell, and you know, which I'll talk about here in a little bit after I talk about Hulk Hogan, but you know, Ozzy Osbourne's passing comes just weeks after he had his final concert with Black Sabbath. And let me tell you, Black Sabbath, they were legendary. They made some pretty kick-ass music. You know, Ozzy Osbourne himself made some pretty kick-ass music too. He had talent. You know, he put out lots of good music. You know, his music was just out there. You know, I definitely think that his music definitely played a part in many people's lives in a good way. You know, a lot of people say that Ozzy Osbourne's music has helped them in their life, and you know, he's got some songs that have definitely gotten me through some good times and through some bad times. You know, his music has really helped me at times, that's for sure. But yeah, you know, like I said, it's unfortunate that Ozzy's no longer with us. You know, it's pretty sad. You know, may he rest in peace, and may God be with everybody who's dealing with the loss of his life. You know, it is pretty sad. Last but not least, we have Hulk Hogan. His passing happened earlier today as of the time I'm making this video, and from what I understand, what happened to him was, I believe, a cardiac arrest with him. I'll have to look into that again. I didn't look into that too much before making this, which I should have, and I apologize if that's not the case. But from what I understand, from what I've heard anyways, it was a cardiac arrest, and first responders definitely spent a good amount of time trying to revive him, and they were unfortunately unsuccessful, and he was pronounced dead at the hospital, which was pretty sad. You know, he was only 71 when it happened, so you know, it is sad on what happened to him. You know, whether or not he had been dealing with anything prior to his passing, I don't really know too much about. You know, I have looked into some things that may have happened prior to his passing, and unfortunately I did not really find much. You know, so regardless, it is pretty sad that he passed away as well. And for that, my heart goes out to him, his family, and all of his friends, you know, as they deal with the loss of his life. You know, may God be with all of them as well. So with that being said, like I said, I'm not really going to be talking about Malcome-Jamal Warner, because like I said, I only know him for like a few movies, and I don't really know too much about him other than that. But with Ozzy Osbourne and Hulk Hogan, though, so you know, I've been hearing a lot of people online just coming up with all sorts of weird things, you know, saying things like, oh, you know, these guys were not good people. You know, Ozzy Osbourne did this, Hulk Hogan did that. You know, Ozzy Osbourne sang about this and that in his song, you know, claimed that he didn't believe in Jesus, blah, blah, blah. He put in a song, oh, it's one of those days where I don't believe in Jesus, da, 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 da. And then with Hulk Hogan, sit there and be like, oh, well, one less Trumper. Oh, well, he was this type of guy, that type of guy. He said some racist things. He's done some bad things, blah, 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 blah. Okay, here's the thing, man. First off, I don't want to make this a political thing. I'm going to try and steer away from politics as much as possible. But at the same time, people, have some damn respect. Not just for the person that passed away, but have some respect for those who are grieving right now. Whether it be their family, their close friends, or just anybody in particular that cared for these people. At the end of the day, nobody is perfect. Yes, Ozzy Osbourne may have sang about some things in some of his songs. And yes, Hulk Hogan may have said some things or done some things that were not good. I get it. I've done my research. I understand what people are getting at. But a lot of you people out there that are judging these people, I'm sorry, but nobody on this planet is perfect. The only person to ever be alive on this planet that I consider the most perfect human being out there is Jesus Christ. I'll say this right now. If you have made a bad decision in your lifetime and you don't own up to it, but here you are judging Ozzy Osbourne or Hulk Hogan or any other celebrity out there who has passed away, all because of a bad decision or a few bad decisions or whatever that they've made, you really don't have the room to speak. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that people can't have their opinions, because yes, you feel how you want to feel. I don't care. I'm not saying that, I want to control other people's opinions. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. But at the same time, have some damn respect for these people. Especially their family and their friends. I'll say this. Cardiac arrests or, health problems or drowning, those are things that I would never in my lifetime wish to happen to anybody. And now, I'm sure some people are probably going to comment and be like, well, you know what, there are some bad people out there. What about people like Diddy? What about people like Hitler? What about people like this guy or that guy? Da 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 da. You know what? Shut the hell up. We're not talking about P. Diddy. We're not talking about Jeffrey Dahmer. We're not talking about some evil bastard that, when killed, multiple people. We're not talking about any of them. We're talking about celebrities here. Celebrities make mistakes or bad decisions just like regular human beings do. But the way I see it with Hulk Hogan, well, first off with Hulk Hogan and then Ozzy Osbourne, yes, like I said, Hulk Hogan has said some things, and I'm sure he's probably done some things too that weren't right. But the way I see it, especially the past few years, is, I look at him and I definitely think that he's gotten better with things and even tried to change his life quite a bit before he passed. got baptized, went to church, and was just trying to be a better human being. And then, unfortunately, like I said, he dies of a cardiac arrest. It's sad. You know, as for Ozzy Osbourne, he put out lots and lots and lots of music, and, claimed to be the Prince of Darkness, and, he said some things in this song that a lot of people out there would not like, and, I'll say this. Everybody's different. I'm not saying you have to like Ozzy Osbourne, and I'm not saying you have to like Hulk Hogan. I'm not saying you have to like Malcome-Jamal Warner. Everybody has their opinions, like I said earlier, and that's fine. But still, just if you're gonna sit there and say things like, "Oh, well, these people are probably burning in hell," they never made it to heaven, or all this and that. Do you guys even go to church? Do you guys even read a Bible? Do you guys even follow Jesus? Because let me tell you, if you do either one of those things or all three, even if this were the case, these are not conclusions that anybody that actually does those things would jump into. As somebody that's trying to work on bettering his life with Jesus, I'd be lying if I said I made some mistakes in my life. I admit, I'm a sinner. I'm pretty sure 99.99% of the people out there are sinners. But if you know what you're doing, and you did wrong, and you make your apologies to the good Lord above for it, maybe you would learn something here. That's for sure. I'm sorry that I'm jumping into the whole religious talk thing. This really isn't about religion, but still, I'm just putting this out there because there's a lot of people that are just jumping into conclusions about people like Ozzy Osbourne or Hulk Hogan, saying, "Oh, well, they did some bad things, so therefore they're burning in hell for their options." Like I said, people make bad decisions, they learn from it. I'm sure they probably pray for forgiveness and repent. And, people change, man. A few bad decisions in your life does not make you a horrible person. I will say that right now. But with that being said, I'm going to cut away from the whole religious talk thing. I know I've said that already, but still. Everybody that's making assumptions about Ozzy Osbourne or Hulk Hogan, y'all just need to keep your mouth shut. Because regardless of what you say, it's not going to make what happened to these guys any better. That's just the unfortunate truth. These people are gone now. Whether or not you think they're in hell or they're in heaven, it's I'm not 100% sure what Ozzy Osbourne's belief was. He's made music about it, Maybe he was a follower of Jesus. I'm not 100% sure. I'll admit, I didn't listen to all of his music. I listened to a lot of it, yeah. mostly his older stuff. He's got. I like a lot of his newer stuff too, but I mostly listen to his older stuff more. And as for Hulk Hogan, like, the only thing I'm getting things out of with him is I think people are only hating on him because of his political opinion. He was a hardcore Trump supporter. He was very right-leaning on a lot of things. And again, I really don't want to bring politics up too much, but, the fact that people get so far wrapped up into politics where, they sit there and they're like, oh, well, if you think like this, then, you're not a good person. If you think like that, oh, you're a very crappy person. Da-da-da-da-da. Like, dude, whether you're conservative or liberal, people are not perfect. People are going to make bad decisions regardless of what side of politics they're on. There's people on the left that I hear about that make very bad decisions, just like there's people on the right that make bad decisions. This whole political thing, this is why I don't get into politics so much anymore on my main channel. Is because you can't have an opinion these days without people jumping on a bandwagon. Oh, well, you think like this, you think like that, so therefore you're a horrible person. Like, get the heck out of here. Y'all just need to get off the internet sometimes. Read a book. Go outside. Take a walk. Do something. Again, like I said, I think a lot of people are talking bad about Hulk Hogan because of his political stance. That's just the way I see it with him. And, like I said, I get it. He said some things or has done some things that were not okay. But again, I've said it multiple times, and I will say it again. Making some bad decisions in your life does not make you the crappiest person out there. Like I said, I have looked into him and a few other celebrities that have unfortunately passed away lately. People make bad decisions and they change. If they're willing to change in a good way and make themselves better and they learn from their mistakes, then, well, what's the big fuss about? Hell, even Hulk Hogan apologized for his behavior. But, hey, because he did it, I guess that doesn't matter. I don't understand people sometimes, man. But like I said, to these three and to a lot of the other celebrities out there that have passed away recently, may God rest all of their souls. This month, well, this week especially, it's been a bad week for a lot of celebrities, Like, the beginning of July, this rapper that I used to listen to, I'll still listen to him on multiple occasions, Young Noble, he ended up committing suicide from what I understand, and, it's pretty sad on what things have come to, But like they always say, nothing stays the same. People don't stick around forever. No life does. This life on Earth, it's just a temporary life. What happens to you after you pass away? whether or not it's heaven or hell, that's eternal. You know, that's just how it works. But I think I've said what all I had to say. I'm sorry this video turned out to be a super long video, but I just wanted to speak about this and, you know, speak my opinion. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of judgment for making this video and saying what I said, and you know what? I really do not care. You know, I'm sorry I didn't speak so much about, you know, Malcome-Jamal Warner. You know, I spoke more about Ozzy Osbourne and Hulk Hogan, but these were the three that's been talked about a lot lately, and I just wanted to speak about mostly the two, but, you know, the three, because, you know, like I said, Malcolm has been mentioned too, and like I said, he's been on a few shows and movies that I liked, you know, so be sure to hug your loved ones, folks, because you never know when something can happen to them. That's what I'm going to say. You guys all take care now, and have a good day, good night, whenever you're watching this. And that's that. Sorry about the noise in the background. If you guys heard anything, you know, I have a fan blowing. It was hot in my room, you know, so I have a fan on, so. Anyways, before I say anything else and get off subject, I'm going to end this. You guys take care now.